On April 17, 2005, the state chapter in New Jersey celebrated its fifth class to be honored by the National Wrestling Hall of Fame with a Lifetime Service to Wrestling Award presented to Coach John M. Allen. Coach Allen began his lifetime commitment to wrestling some 50 years ago at St. Benedict's Prep School. Coach Allen coached 30 individual champions and 7 national prep champions, the foremost being Mike Caruso, who recorded an 81 wins to 0 loss high school record before earning 3 NCAA championships at Lehigh University. John is an exceptional individual. He has devoted his life in working with young people through athletics, teaching the skills and attitudes fundamental for success in sports, but more importantly, teaching his wrestlers how to win with humility and lose with grace and dignity. Coach Allen has always enjoyed the reputation of being a gentleman coach who brought credit to his profession, teams, schools, community, and family. And now, here is Coach Allen, who will instruct us on skills.
For the purpose of executing the L, unless his expertise, your opponent's susceptibility, and other circumstances which would cause such movement to be deemed wise are present. If you're going to use elevator, make the first succeed, because the probability of success generally decreases with each attempt. So you want the psychology to flow your way. Success breeds success. If you execute and make it work, it'll continue to work, or at least it's more likely to continue to work any other time you try it in that event. All right, the elements of execution. Generally, the best preliminary pose finds an individual posted on his hip and corresponding elbow or hand. So if you're on your left hip, you've got your left elbow or left hand posted on the mat. You use your free top hand to grasp opponent's upper arm, trunk wrap arm, and then you slip your instep, foot of your top leg, inside and against opponent's near knee. You're going to elevate up at the knee, not up in the groin area where the weight factor is greater. The actual elevator involves raising your foot along an arc path as you go to your back to provide oomph. Remain on your back only momentarily, and then quickly sit up and look to more quickly hip hoist generally, and sprawl a bit perhaps, as you drape a whizzer in. To complete the movement, generally what you're going to have to do is react to the opponent's reaction. You have to select the correct follow-up technique and move smartly. Most of the time, you will be hip hoisting to the front and ending up in an overhook grip. And you want to place your free hand on his head or on his wrist or at his elbow so you don't get barrel rolled and put back down underneath. All right, facing the opposite direction. One more time. We're on our hip. We use our free hand to grasp opponent's upper arm. We slip our instep inside against his knee. We go to our back, and as we go down with our upper body, we raise our lower body up. We sit up quickly, hip hoist to the front, and get in a position where opponent could not counter move us at this juncture with barrel roll. So elevators can save. They can be a supplement to other moves. They can get opponent off balance to enable other moves to be worked. So elevators worth knowing. All right, and also from the elevator as a combination with it, instead of a change off to a whizzer, if you elevate an opponent and he happens not to rebound, he happens to stay over on his backside a little bit and his arms up in the air just that little bit that's necessary, you can shoot your arm inside his arm, underneath it, rather than over top it, switch hips, do turn action, put him on his back, and get 2 upper arms. Also, if you have an elevator going and the opponent has good balance, he stabilizes his balance by putting his hand out as a post so you can't get him off balance. Instead of staying with a mere attempted elevator, you change to a switch. You sit up, get inside, get your hand on that leg, and then initiate switch action. if the opponent happens to have reach around wrist grip, he has your wrist when you're going into the elevator. What you can do to complete the move is do slip of the half. You put his half Nelson in for him, switch hips by hip hoisting, and trap him on his back. And as another move, if opponent happens to have a high wrap on your body, up around your upper abdomen or chest, and you elevate him, you successfully get him off balance, but his wrap around your upper body is such that you can't sit up to hip hoist well. Forget attempting that, and grab his wrist and run your feet away and do high turn action. And you get yourself out to at least a neutral, if not more. So via elevator, if the opponent rebounds to recover base, we hip hoist and put a whizzer in. If opponent rolls over and somewhat dies, we get underneath his arm and use turn action to get to upper arms. If opponent happens to post a hand to prevent his loss of balance, we change off to a switch. If opponent happens to have reach around wrist grip when we initiated the elevator, we contemplate changing off to slip of the half. If the opponent has a high body wrap on us where we feel that sitting up isn't going to be successful, we grab that wrist that's around our body and change to a high turn, change our direction, and attempt to get at least a neutral, if not a reversal, via high turn. So elevator is a good move, and it has combinations that can be worked from it. All right, the next item on our list of escapes reversals to be put onto this film is our flip. Flip is used in our scene as a preliminary item to teaching Granby roll. And the one thing you want to do first is clear your feet. Now, when we do the flip from kneeling, we swish our feet to the outside to get them away from opponent where he won't cover them, catch us in tuck position, which is a dangerous position to get caught in. We then bring our inside hand to the outside of our outside knee, turning palm up, and we go into an angular tuck movement so we can do a shoulder roll. And as we come out of that shoulder roll, we want to face the exact opposite direction from whence we started. Once again, facing a different direction. We swish our feet to the outside to get them clear, away from opponent, so he can't cover them, perhaps injure us, catching us in the midst of our tuck. We bring our inside hand across to the outside of our outside knee, turn our palm up, do an angular tuck action in the shoulder roll, and come out of the shoulder roll, landing on our knees, facing the exact opposite direction. Now from a half up position, that is from a bear position, we raise our knees and our butt off the mat, leaving our feet and hands posted. We're going to step our inside foot across in front of our outside foot. That's our method to clear our feet. Going to bring the inside hand across to the outside of our outside leg, turn palm up. We're going to go into our angular tuck and do a shoulder roll. And come out of that shoulder roll facing the exact opposite way from whence we started. One more time, facing a different direction. We get into our bear position, bring inside foot across in front of outside leg, inside foot across in front of outside leg, bring our inside hand across to the outside, and do an angular tuck using our step across foot as our power foot for push off as we go into the flip action. All right, our next escape reversal type action that we'll go over is high leg over. High leg over we normally would do from kneeling, either via a Hun school escape technique or against a side crunch action by the opponent on the whistle. Some of the elements of execution. While the opponent is alongside, we whip our outside leg up and over, both our inside leg and opponent's body. And we're going to set our foot way around so that it offers a reliable brace. We'll show it first here against a side crunch. The man on top does side crunch. We whip that leg up and over our own leg, his hips, and we brace that foot. Once the leg whip over has occurred, we pick up the opponent's bottom knee and hold it high enough to immobilize him until full control of him can be accomplished, either via a leg over cradle or freeing our leg from disentanglement and hip hoisting into a reverse Nelson crotch position. So once again, against the side crunch, when the opponent side crunches, we go with the momentum that he creates, whip a leg way over, set it out as a brace, grab the bottom knee, hold it high, and either apply a leg over cradle or disentangle our leg and hip hoist and get reverse Nelson crotch. Now, in that process, if we happen not to be able to get over, if our opponent fights that, we're sliding off to the side from whence we originally came, then what we can do is change off to a switch. So the opponent has side crunch, and now he's resisting that. By bringing us back to the other side, we change off and go to our next move. All right, the same high leg over action against the leg hook ride. If the opponent has a leg hook, what we'll do is overhook his free leg with our instep. We'll get our hips in the air, drive them laterally into the opponent, and do high leg over action. From there, we grab the bottom knee and either apply the cradle or hip hoist, disentangle our leg, hip hoist, and get reverse Nelson crotch. Facing Northfield. Opponent has a leg hook. We use our foot to overhook his free leg. Hips go up in the air, move laterally into opponent. High leg over action takes place. We grab that bottom knee and hold it high, and then complete as shown earlier. All right, we're going to demonstrate a low turn-in, dip out and turn, and it's a very basic move, an old move, and yet still useful. We get into the sit-out via a short step up and a sit directly to the front, and then from that position, the dip out and turn in simply means that you slide your hips to the front, rotate inward to your shoulder, toward your shoulder, keeping your other arm in close to your body, and get back to a kneeling position. Try to catch the opponent in a frontal facing position. One more time. Take a very short step up, sit directly to the front, dip our hips out to the front, rotate, dropping down to our shoulder, and come into a kneeling position and catch the opponent in front. That same move can be used if ever, when you sit out into a sit position, the opponent stays with the referee's grip, the waist and arm. So if an opponent has waist and arm and you sit out, that's a cue, a signal to indicate that he's vulnerable to dip and turn. It would be very tough for him to stay in control position using just a waist and arm grip to ride. Another moment when dip out and turn in is useful is via a switch attempt. If you go for a switch and opponent circles away, moves away from the switch attempt, once you hit that position, you can dip and turn. One more time. You go for a switch, full out effort for a switch, but he moves away, you dip and turn, change your direction, and catch him in front for a neutral. All right, we have just shown low turn-in. Now we will demonstrate and talk about high turn-in. We can do it starting from a kneeling position at the ref's whistle, or we can do it anytime we're out in a sit-out position. Now from the ref's position, you bring your inside hand back a bit just prior to the short sit to the front, and you grab the wrist en route into your short sit to the front. Once into the short sit position, you thrust your gut upward, very high, and then rotate your trunk and bring outside leg over the top of inside leg. dropping to elbow and then head. Knees are kept off the mat to provide a tough hill for the opponent to climb if you care to get around behind. You shoot your hand back to your own hip to guard against a step around, so you can't come around and hook your leg. For the same purpose, you also walk your feet away a bit. And then you proceed in response to your desire or follow-up and/or opponent's reaction. The normal follow-up is a wrist leg roll. And you get Granby pin grip as you finish the wrist leg roll. One more time. Bring the inside hand back a bit just prior to the short sit, grabbing the wrist while en route into the sit-out. You thrust your gut upward high, and then rotate the trunk and bring outside leg over the top of inside leg, posting an elbow and then head. Knees are kept off the mat. Shoot your hand back to your own hip to guard against a step around. Walk your feet away a bit, and then proceed to get inside crotch grip. Grab the leg from inside and do wrist leg roll to get him a Granby pin. Now, if you are already in sit-out and care to do the high turn, it's essentially the same thing. Keep your knees, legs cocked, knees bent, feet, heels close to butt, so that you will be in a position to really gut up. Send that gut high, drop down to head and elbow as you rotate your body trunk, and then what we'll do this time is have the opponent not follow. And if the opponent doesn't follow, then we drop back down toward our knees and do duck under type action with our head. We block a step over, and we bring arm up through the crotch just in case the opponent would counter with a late step over attempt. One more time. We're in the sit position. Heels are pretty close to butt. Knees are cocked. And we gut up and proceed into the high leg over action. If the opponent does not attempt to follow, we bring our knees back down toward the mat, start bringing our head up in a duck under type fashion, but then we stop at a certain point and put our head in the ribs area to block any late step over attempt. And then arm comes up through crotch to do exactly the same, block step over, and we proceed to go in behind him to get our two-point reversal. Sometimes in the process of doing the high turn, the opponent gets his hand, second hand, his free hand behind our arm, and that can make completions difficult. His being behind the arms is a good position for him. If we would care to do the wrist leg roll completion, it can be difficult from here unless we take a backhand grip on his leg and use our own strength to lift him over. Once we get him over, we come inside crotch with our grip, and we get the Granby pin. So a backhand technique can be utilized to do a lift over to get him into the wrist leg roll completion position. Since via the high turn we've been demonstrating wrist leg roll, we're going to start with the wrist leg roll grip and show some of the combos. If you ever have a wrist leg roll grip, of course you could do the standard thing, and that would be to do far roll action and bring them over. If that's difficult to do, you try to get him over and he won't go, you can come back toward your base, wind up a little bit, and go extra hard to get him over. Another possibility sometimes is the arm that's wrapped around his leg, the hand of that arm can reach in and get a grip on his wrist so that you can let go with the grip that you had on that wrist, and post that free hand so that you can raise your upper body up, which will bring him across your body and into a position where you can get the pin grip. Now you can keep the wrist as you had it and go for the head. One more time, facing a different direction. This is a one-armed wrist leg roll. The arm that is around his leg reaches in, and you switch wrist grips. You're going to grab it with one hand, let go with the hand you originally had it with. That now free hand posts so that you can use your hand and arm to push off and take them over in far roll action. Once opponent's over, you go after his head, grab your own knee, and you have him in what we call a complete Granby pin grip. Another movement off wrist leg roll grip would be a sit-back reaction. If opponent tilts his hip toward the mat, that is the hip that's near to your hips, if he tilts that hip toward the mat to prevent being rolled over, you can simply sit backward into him, diagonally backward, and you'll get him in Granby pin grip. One more time from a different angle. You have wrist leg roll grip, and opponent tilts the hip that's near your hips down toward the mat in an effort to prevent being rolled over, tries to sag his hip low. All you do is you sit back into him and take him into a Granby pin position. Now, if he happens to tilt his other hip to prevent being rolled over, and he sags it low enough, and you feel in a position that you would care to make this sort of a desperate move, you can do a forward flip and get across his body via the flip and have him in Granby pin position. So again, if opponent tilts his other hip, the one nearer to your head, toward the mat and sags it low in an effort to prevent you from bringing him across, you just do a forward flip and get him in Granby pin. You can also change off to a high turn-in. If you have wrist leg roll grip, instead of staying with that move, and attempt to bring him across you, what you can do is release on the leg and do high turn-in action, run your feet away, and then come back toward the mat with your knees and do duck under type movement, watching out for a late step over his part and behind him and get the reversal. If opponent, while you have him in wrist leg roll grip, stretches his leg back a bit, not a whole lot, what you can do is change off, release that is, and get single leg head inside. He's in a vulnerable position to a leg attack. One more time from a different angle. You have a wrist leg roll grip. An opponent doesn't tilt his hips, merely just stretches one leg back, the tied leg back a bit. You can release on what you have, change off to a single head in grip, and then attack. Finish the single head in any way you deem wise. Also, if opponent stretches his leg, the target leg, the tied up leg that is, way back, where a single would not be so possible, what you can do is look away and go into Granby roll action, shoulder roll, keep your head down, keep your hip down, and allow opponent, hopefully, to step around so you get inside crotch grip and roll across into Granby pin. One more time. Opponent stretches his leg way back so that you wouldn't be able to change to a single. His leg is too far away to attack. What you can do is look away, do a Granby roll action, that is a shoulder roll action. You stay down in your hip, keep your head low, hoping he'll step around the head, and you roll across with wrist leg roll action. If opponent's in a position where you have him in a wrist leg roll grip, and he stretches that leg way back, what you can do is change to a wrist other leg roll. That is, you forget about the leg you were holding, let go of it entirely, grab his other leg from outside, and do far roll action to bring him across. Once across, you grab the proper leg to have the Granby pin grip. Tend not to hook opponent's leg when you're in wrist leg roll pose, as it generally leads to a stalemate. It's a common mistake made by youngsters when they have wrist leg roll grip. They'll hook opponent's leg, but it's usually not helpful, and it leads to a stalemate, which means you've wasted a lot of time and haven't brought yourself anything of worth. Now, going back to wrist other leg roll grip, if you change off to wrist other leg roll grip, and somehow the opponent frees his wrist, what you can do is wing the leg that is pulled down under, go to your shoulder, do a high leg over action. When you get on the other side, get Peterson cradle. pivot in action is one of the more basic movements in wrestling, and there are various moments when pivot in is a worthwhile item. One of the times when a pivot in is essential or could be helpful, and it's often neglected, is when you've been in a predicament, you're coming off your back. You want to pivot and catch your opponent in front if at all possible. As you come off your back, you pivot toward him, get an arm up to prevent him going behind. The most common complaints about someone's pivot in can be summarized by saying pivot faster, further, and better. You got to do it quickly, you got to do it sufficiently, you got to do it well. If you sense ever that as you're pivoting that an ankle grab is imminent, to prevent your pivot, stretch the target leg a bit. Don't let him get a hold of the foot. As you pivot, you should raise up a bit, but beware of opponent changing off to some sort of pancake. Watch your balance. As you pivot, if you see the opportunity, tend to be aggressive. If you can get a hold of opponent's leg, either one or both, attack. Don't ever pivot in such a way as to be open for a cradle. In other words, if you pivot and you bring a knee up off the mat, that will allow opponent to put an RC on. You tend to avoid that happening by keeping your knees close to the mat. As the man starts to circle behind, you just pivot the face. Keep your knees close. Don't let a knee come off the mat. If opponent chases your pivot in, by that I mean he's getting in around behind you, consider far roll action. Because if he's going to get behind, go to your next move. Don't stay with any one move too long. All right, basic pivot in action from referee's position. If an opponent is in referee's position and you care to execute pivot in, what you do is you reach across with your outside hand, grab his wrist, and you simply dip your head inside and underneath him, and you're in a position to attack. Single head in, or at least attack with your choice as to what type of attack move you want to work. But single head in is the item that's most obvious as being available. One more time. Simple pivot in. You reach across with your outside hand, get the wrist, dip your head down and under, and get into a position where you can attack. And once again, anytime you pivot, keep your knees close to the mat and just pivot your upper body as a unit, your entire body, in fact, as a unit. Okay, rules. There are 4 basic roll actions that are taught. Far roll, wrist leg roll, which we've already put on film, Granby roll, and near side roll. We're going to demonstrate now, lecture upon far roll. Ideally, as an initial part of the execution, you create some prior motion to camouflage your intent, to set the opponent up, and to provide some necessary momentum. Well, we're going to do it without the prior motion right now. We're going to do it from a dead ball. However, as an example of prior motion, I'll just mention that you could do a sit out and turn in, and as opponent follows, you could catch him with far roll action. Or if opponent is spinning behind you at any time, you might be able to execute far roll action. Now the far roll itself. You want to secure and bind the wrist of opponent's waist strap arm very tightly, and then reposition your own inside arm in such a manner that your elbow can be used to block any counter wrist grip try, which means simply you bring your elbow back close to your ribs so opponent couldn't come in underneath and grab your wrist in counter wrist grip fashion. You then bring your outside knee across in front of your inside knee as you pivot in slightly. Drop down to the outside elbow, placing it pretty much where your inside hand was. And while curling up in a ball, keeping your inside elbow in close to your own ribs to act as an auxiliary force to bring opponent over, you rotate your hips, welding your knees together, going to your elbow and rump, and that is best. Going to the elbow and rump is generally best. And you elevate. Very important aspect of the far roll is is you do elevator action, and ideally you do it on his trail leg, the one that was further away from you at the outset. Once you've rolled him over, executing the L in the proper way, you sit up, release your grip on the wrist at the optimal moment so that you can hip hoist in an easy manner and insert reverse Nelson crotch and trap him on his back. You've got to be smooth and quick in the final stages of the far roll. So one more time from a different angle. You secure and bind the wrist of opponent's waist strap on. Get it very tightly. You bring your own inside arm back close to your ribs. You push that wrist deeper across your waist while pivoting in and bringing outside knee across in front of own inside knee. You drop your outside elbow toward a spot on the mat where your hand was. And while curling up in a ball and keeping your inside elbow in close to your own ribs, you perform the roll action and elevate them to get them all the way over. You try ideally to go across your elbow and rump using them as support points. Once you've gotten them over, what you want to do is sit up, release your wrist grip at the optimal moment so that you can facilitate your own hip hoist and get reverse Nelson crotch. All right, to just show a couple of combinations off far roll other than hip hoist to reverse Nelson. If a far roll is attempted and opponent happens to have a counter wrist grip, which is always possible, if he's well trained, he'll try to reach in and get a counter wrist grip. As you roll him across, what you can do is grab his upper arm, put a half Nelson in for him, put his half Nelson in, and then hip hoist and trap him on his back. You'll have either half Nelson or reverse Nelson available to you. On basic far roll at the completion, the reason why reverse Nelson is the designated choice is because about 90% of the time the opponent will try to rotate away. But on the slip of the half, he may be rotating inward, and half Nelson might be the item that is called for. Another possibility on a far roll, if you far roll an opponent and he happens to go over, but his free hand he brings inside and wraps high on your body trunk, it'll be hard to sit up and hip hoist to complete the far roll. So instead of doing that, and as opponent tries to rotate back to base, you can change off to a switch. Switch will be available to you, and you just complete the switch as you normally would. All right, the next roll type that we'll cover is near roll. Near roll from a kneeling position might be executed if opponent reaches under your body, perhaps seeking far arm grip. And what you do is you put a tight clamp on his upper arm. You raise your head up a bit, turn away from him a bit. You go down to your near shoulder as a post and pivot, not your elbow, and initiate a proper step over. Step with near leg first and maintain a facing relationship with the mat. Step high and far, and upon landing, set your knee nearer to his head out as a brace against potential re-roll or bridge, and immediately secure reverse Nelson crotch. One more time, different angle. From a kneeling position, the opponent reaches across for far arm. You clamp his arm high, raise up a bit, turn away a bit, go down to your shoulder, step high and far, try to face the mat as much as possible as you step, post knee nearer to his head as a brace against the re-roll or a bridge, and then immediately secure reverse Nelson crotch. Now if the opponent happens to re-roll, if he happens to go with your roll action, he's vulnerable to switch. So we'll do it in slow-mo. You started into a near roll action, and opponent goes with it, re-rolling you. As he goes for the re-roll, you can go for the switch. One more time from a different angle. A near roll is being attempted, but the opponent is counter-moving by executing re-roll action. Going with it, you immediately change off to a switch action. All right, the next roll that we're going to cover here is Granby roll. Now we do it from 3 levels. From the lowest level in a basic sit position, we call it a baby Granby. When we do it from a hand post, we call it an adolescent Granby. When we do it from a swisher, half sit, half stand position, we call it an adult Granby. The higher up you go, the more dangerous to move actually, but if practiced well, it isn't near as dangerous as it might be. Number 1, from the sit position, we're going to do a baby Granby. We secure and maintain a very firm wrist grip, not a forearm grip, but a wrist grip. We keep our legs cocked, keep our back vertical to the mat, and we keep our free arm close to our own body so the opponent cannot get a second hand inside behind their arms. We try to block that. Now, sufficient momentum has to be provided or created. If the opponent is chopping us to the side, he'll provide the momentum. If not, we're going to have to get a lot of push-off from our foot, from our feet actually, but it's the onside foot that does most of the pushing. If we're flipping to the left, then our left foot's going to do most of the pushing. As we initiate the flip action, the Granby action, we tuck chin to chest and clasp the hock of our onside knee or slip our hand behind our own back. Here we're going to demonstrate by grabbing the hock of our own onside knee. You want to flip in a compact manner, keeping your knees close to the mat throughout, and ideally you want to bring your neck underneath where your butt is now touching the mat. From a sitting position on a baby Granby, you do have to move a bit laterally to the side, but from a hand post or from a swisher position, it's easier, it's made a lot easier to bring your head under where your butt was. Well, right now, going on the baby Granby, we start laterally to the side a little bit, get a good push, get our hips up and over, and then we stay low. We stay on our hip, head down, hoping the opponent will step around so that we can secure wrist leg roll grip and do wrist leg roll action and get them in Granby pin grip. One more time. Baby Granby. We get a good wrist grip. We cock our legs. We keep our back vertical to the mat. We try to fix the opponent, keep them directly behind us and tight to us. We tuck our chin to the chest as we grab the hock of our knee, and we give a sufficient push off with our feet, particularly one foot, the onside foot. Get our hips up and over, stay low on our hip, head down. Hope the opponent steps around so that we can bring him across with wrist leg roll action and get him in Granby pin. If he had not followed, had not circled our head, he would have done duck under action. Now we'll do it from a hand post. From that same sit position, we post the hand, raise our hips up vertically from the mat. Don't let our hips go out to the front much at all. And then we do the exact same motion, but now we try all the more to bring our head under where our butt was. Try to move as little laterally to the side as possible. One more time. Via hand post, using that hand and arm as a post, we raise our hips vertically off the mat, and we give it sufficient oomph into the push-off. We execute the Granby, bring him across, and try to get him over on his back, wrist leg roll out. And now we'll do it from the third position, the adult Granby. What we had just done is called adolescent Granby. The adult Granby, we do swishing. Our butt comes off the mat. Our inside foot steps to where our outside hand is, and we swish our hips, swivel our hips, and get into a half-standing, half-sitting position. And then once again, if opponent will help us by trying to chop us to the side, we'll hit the Granby. And again, if he doesn't follow, then what we'll do is duck under action and come in behind him. If he had followed, we would do the wrist leg roll action and bring him across the Granby pin.
John, what time?
What time? Just to finish up on Granby roll with some comments from notes here. You want to know when to Granby and when not to. You don't Granby if the timing, position, and ability are not all what they should be. If it isn't the right moment, or you're not in the right position, or your opponent's not in the right position, and or you don't have the ability to execute the move, you don't want to do Granby. Granby can be a dangerous move. If your legs are not clear and can't be cleared, you don't want to Granby. If you get caught in a tuck position, you risk breaking your neck, not your pinky, your neck. You also want to remember that if you manage to secure a Granby pin grip via a successful Granby, you've got to know whether or not the ref has near fall points in mind for you, or even whether reversal points have yet been awarded. Different refs have been known to judge post-Granby control differently, at least in timing, if not in scoring. At another moment, we will be going over the various things you can do from Granby pin. At this moment, we'll just mention that you have to be alert as to what the official might have in mind. Now, we've gone over various types of rolls on film. In the Monday film, we did cross wrist roll, which is simply a variation of far roll. In the Monday film, we also went over farmer's roll, which is a standing exotic wrist leg roll. So the rolls that we have covered thus far are far roll and variations thereof, wrist leg roll and a variation thereof, Granby roll, and near side roll. And we keep the list to 4 and let the others be actual variations of those 4 rolls. Rolls are very potent because they not only reverse an opponent, but more often than not bring near fall points, and of course sometimes even the pin that we all seek. So rolls are worth knowing. All right, now the ideal is to learn moves in series, to put moves together that complement one another, and to give an example or two, actually we're going to give 2, of escape reversal move series. We're going to do first what we call a swisher series, and there are 3 moves within the series. The swisher itself, as we demonstrated earlier on film, we butt up, butt goes in the air, weight on hands, we step inside foot to outside hand, swivel our hips, swish our hips, and get into a half stand, half sit position. Now the 3 moves are based on the reaction of the opponent. If the opponent drives forward into us, we go to Oki 2-on-1 action and get ourselves a movement using a cut through. If on the other hand, from that same position, the swisher position, the opponent tries to chop us over to the side to bring us back to the mat, we do Granby. We go with the chopping action and hit a Granby and complete it as we showed earlier. If the opponent, when we're in the swisher position, were to pull us back toward himself in an attempt to bring us back to the mat, then we would do high turn. So once again, there are 3 movements from the swisher position, and we'll demonstrate them one more time from a different angle. Once we're in the swisher pose, if the opponent drives forward toward us, we do Oki 2-on-1. Get a cut through going and get a neutral. If the opponent happens to chop us to the side, we go with the momentum and do a Granby. If the opponent, with his waist and arm grip, happens to try to pull us back toward himself, then we go into a high turn before he puts us down in sit position. He can't dump us to his right because he doesn't have the leverage to do so with his grip. So there's only 3 directions he can go, forward, left, or backward, and there's a move for each of those attempts. Now, rock back series. Rock back series is Stan Dietzick, the national champion, world champion series that he used very successfully in college. And the essence of it is he rocks back and sits on his inside heel, bringing his inside hand back close to his hip area, and his outside knee comes off the mat. And once again, you react to the opponent's reaction. If the opponent pushes forward into you, you slip your leg through to the front and rise up into a stand-up position and do Oki 2-on-1. If the opponent happens to try to chop you to his left, then you can go right into a Granby. If the opponent happens to try to pull you back into himself, that is when you can drop down into a high turn in action. And there's a fourth move in his series, not frequently used, but possible. If the opponent gets up high into your back, crowding you to prevent some of the other things you might do, then what you can do is go into far roll action. You just change off into a far roll type action, bring him across, complete the far roll as you normally would. One more time, from a different angle. If you're in referee's position and care to use rock back technique as a setup to cause the opponent to create some reactions on his part, once you're into the position, you're sitting on your heel, not so much on your butt. You want to sit on your heel. If he happens to drive forward, you slide your foot through and post it and rise up into a position where you can execute Oki 2-on-1. Cut through. If opponent were to chop you to his left, then you can go with the momentum and do a Granby. If the opponent tries to draw you back toward himself, trying to snap you back into him, you post your elbow and whip your leg over and get into high turn action and complete the move as you normally would. And finally, if the opponent happens to crowd you and he's up high into you, you can go right into far roll action, catching him up high. He's vulnerable to the far roll. All right, another basic move from the bottom is a step over. We'll do it the old-fashioned way. First, where an opponent, when he lined up in a referee's position, could not line up with his trail leg around behind you, covering your leg. So he was vulnerable in those days to the step over. And all it involved was getting up into a bare position and then beginning to step laterally into your opponent, facing the mat the whole time. And if need be, you hook his arm and sweep his arm under you. And then knee near to the head acts as a brace, it's posted, and you get reverse Nelson crotch. That's an old-fashioned step-over move at the referee's whistle. Another step-over action has already been demonstrated, but we'll do it again in slow-mo to put emphasis on certain aspects of the step-over. Number one, you want to go to your inside shoulder and use it as a post and a pivot as a fulcrum when you do the step-over. And you aim high and far as you step with the inside leg first, letting the outside leg merely follow. You try to maintain a facing relationship with the mat the whole time. You don't turn toward your back. And upon landing, you set the knee as a brace and get reverse Nelson crotch. One more time. Plant the arm high. This is near roll action. It's a step over. You raise up to create momentum. You go down to your shoulder as a pivot point. Step high and far. Post knee nearest the head up as a brace so the opponent can't go with you and come into you or bridge out of it. And then you get reverse Nelson crotch to finish. Whizzer is actually a defense against attack move takedowns, particularly single head in and double leg drop, but it also at times can be used as an escape. If you're the bottom man and an opponent has hooked your leg, one of the better counters to leg hook is to get a whizzer in, drill with it, and move to the front to get a neutral position. If your opponent happens to let go of your arm, you'll be able to put a whizzer in. If he doesn't let go of your arm, you reach in and touch his hand. When you touch his hand, that stimulus ought to get him to let go of your arm and start to reach in for your wrist. As he comes inside to get your wrist, go inside to get the wrist like. As he comes inside to get the wrist, you release on his hand, raise your upper body up, shift your body to the outside, and windmill a whizzer in. And the reason why you raise up, move away so that the opponent can't get a deep false half or double trouble applied. You want to keep your toes hooked around his lower leg so he can't unhook and come toward the front to apply deep false half or double trouble. Once the whizzer's in, you give the opponent a jolt or two until your attachment grip can be sufficiently deepened by crawling your fingers down along your leg a little deeper. Once it's in a little further, a little deeper, the whizzer, you can apply some real torque pressure, and that you do. You drill with the whizzer by looking away, heaving your hip into him, and applying leverage with the overhook grip. If need be, you raise the inside knee off the mat a little bit to increase somewhat the force being applied, and that'll also prepare that inside leg for its escape to the front. At the optimal moment, while drilling, slip the inside leg to the front via a sit grip. Lean into the opponent as you do so, and then quickly rotate to a firm base. And face him on a slight angle and have chin hovering over his neck. Once you get to the front, do not insert your arm in an underhook position. Do not dangle your arm. Either way, he could get barrel roll grip and put you down under, maybe on your back. Put your hand in a safe spot, either on his head or in the crook of his arm, or you grab a wrist. And then you look to work the different moves that can be worked from overhook freeze position. Okay. We're going to cover some rides now, just a few of them, as part of the day's work. And the first thing I'm going to mention, among the dozen things I'm going to mention, is be an aggressive rider. Right away, put opponent on defense as soon as the ref blows the whistle. And in general, while riding, stay behind opponent's arms. Don't drape an arm over top the shoulder. Stay behind his arms. That's usually key to controlling him, staying behind him. As you ride, keep your balance foremost in mind. Tend not to tilt your hips as you move around them, and when kneeling, keep your knees spread wide apart to lower your center of gravity, to set your braces in the form of a large angle for definite support. Number 4, tend to ride heavy. That is, make opponent bear your weight, but not too high. Don't get too far up toward his head or simply overextended in relation to his body. But make him bear your weight. Wear him down, tire him. When legs are not involved in controlling opponent, keep your own legs free. You cannot expect to much control opponent if you do not first have much control of yourself. Number 6, to establish or increase leverage over opponent, gain hand or wrist control. Wrist control can be key to controlling the opponent and also can be a great lead up to a pin grip. Strictly riding, trying only to stay on top, is not the name of the game. The name of the game is pin, not win. So you work for a fall. If you break opponent down to his stomach or hip, use your hands to control opponent's wrist. That is, get a wrist bar or get a tight bar, example. And use your feet where feasible to prevent his legs from restricting your mobility. Shrewd use of your hands should help you to keep him prone, and shrewd use of your feet can enable you to clear the way when you want to step around a bit relative to his body. Number 9, do not let opponent get to a facing position. But if he does, despite your best efforts, stay toward his rear. Do not stop wrestling. Be active and smart. As you try not to let him get a neutral position. But if he does, he does. And you just try to make sure that you react smartly and wisely once he gets to the front. Number 10, if a reversal is seemingly inevitable, rather than resist tenaciously and thereby get not only reversed but tied up, or worse, put on your back, it may be wise to concede the reversal. Perhaps better yet, try to give opponent 1 point instead of 2. It's decision time. Also, again, realize that clinging eats up the clock, and you must consider giving yourself enough time to get the point or points back. So you've got to be smart in this sport. You've got to make some wise decisions. Number 11, if ever reverse, don't stop wrestling. If you stop, you'll probably score more. As a result of a reversal, all is not lost unless you think so. Never let that thought enter your mind. Keep your head up and keep on competing. Have no regrets. And finally, number 12, aside from aggression and balance, which are somewhat ingrained, all else that superior riding ability entails can be much developed, and even aggression and balance can be somewhat developed. Be aware that what you must most use or want to develop, since it is the key to riding, is your knowledge of position and moves. Know your opponent's possible moves when you have them in a given position or ride, and then be able to block and or counter those moves. Further, learn to program ahead with precise imagination and get discipline and decisiveness to become part of the overall fine blend. Lastly, avoid the foolish and the illegal. For example, don't lock hands illegally. The first of the leg rides that we tend to put emphasis on is called crab ride. And crab ride is very useful for controlling the opponent from the top. And we'll show it against the roll, because one of the most common moments when you can get a crab ride on an opponent is when the opponent is rolling it. If he grabs wrist and indicates he's going to hit you with a far side roll, you shift around behind him and get your knee under his hip, so his hip will not strike the mat, or rather your knee will. And you just sit into a position where you can hide your feet behind his legs, and that's crab ride. Then from there you try to control a wrist or both wrists, or get a 2-on-1, prevent opponent from counter moving. One more time. If opponent grabs wrist and indicates he's going to give you far roll action, you bring your knee around to the rear, in fact to the far side, place it alongside his hip so that when he does the roll action, his hip cannot go to the mat. Your knee gets there first, and then you put him in a sitting position in your lap, and you hide your feet, your insteps behind his knees, lower legs, and you have him in what's called crab ride position. Another opportunity to get a crab ride is when you know an opponent is about to go after a switch. As he goes to sit through for the switch, you sit under him and pull him up into your lap with your waist strap arm, and you'll have him in crab ride position. One more time. The opponent goes for a switch. You use your waist strap arm to pull him into your lap, and you sit under him as he sits away, and you'll have the crab ride. A third moment for applying crab ride would be via an inside drag, which we've already put on film. If opponent has leg hook and loops the near arm, you can sit inside and do an inside drag bypass. And as you're attempting to do drag bypass action, if opponent is trying to do high leg over and your instep behind his knee won't stop it, what you do is you release on the hamstring, reach up and grab the waist, scoop your hips away a little bit, rotate him into you with that waist strap arm and sit him in your lap, and you'll have crab ride. Now from that crab ride position, it's important to know that you can switch off to grate. All you do is you take one of your legs from underneath and bring it up over the top and start to insert a grate, and then you go after cross-face action and rise, get your hips a little up, and you can either stay down to the side a little bit and keep him in a Jake position, or you can let him rotate to his base and you come up into cross-body ride position. If he comes into you and you fail to post, you're not successful posting your foot, and he's sitting your hips down under him, you can change back to crab ride, just like hiding your feet underneath his legs. One more time, we whip a leg from crab ride into great position. Bring one of the feet that's underneath over the top, cross face, get your hips up a little bit so you could apply a Jacobson, go after some near fall points or a pin. If the opponent happens to rise all the way up, gets to his base, and he comes into you, and you fail to post sufficiently to keep from falling under, you feel yourself falling under, what you can do is grab his body trunk, rotate his hips a little bit, scoot your hips away, sit him into your lap, and then hide your feet underneath his legs, and you'll have him in crab ride. Still with regard to crab ride, while opponent's being brought into crab ride, you have to be alert for his attempts to immediately elude the control that the ride offers. He may try, for example, if you're pulling him back into you, to flip through the crab ride. So you've got to be alert for that possibility. Or he may try to dismount to the side, that is, get his hips off your lap. So you have to keep a deep wrap on his trunk to keep him from being able to slide his hips off your lap. Or he may dip his hips down and then reach up and grab their head, to use a head grab as a counter move. And then you'd either have to hide your head or tie up the wrist that you anticipate is going to be coming up toward your head area to grab. So be alert against crab ride counters. Crab ride, used purely as a long-term control method, is a stall. Therefore, it's illegal. Therefore, crab ride has to be used as a pin lead-up in and of itself, or it must serve as a preliminary item for some other ride or grip, which hopefully will lead toward a pin. As a pin lead-up, some considerations are deep waist strap and tight bar combination. So you get a tight bar on one side, you wrap deeply with your free arm around the opponent's waist. And then you use your crab ride foot, one of them, to elevate the opponent off your lap. And as he rotates toward his base, you grab wrist and start to run the head. Keep his head low, run the head, and pin him with tight bar, wrist bar combo. Or, again from crab ride, if you can get a one-on-one, a wrist bar, and a half Nelson, what you can do is use one of your crab ride feet to elevate him off to the side. You post your own head so you can jump across, and then you pin the man, put him over with wrist bar in half. Chest on chest, rather than stomach on chest is ideal. Or, if as you pull opponent back toward crab ride position, if he posts both his hands, he makes himself vulnerable to what we call a screamer. And what you do is you just underhook his two arms near the elbow area, each of them, and then use a foot to elevate him off high if you can, so you can boost him up into a stack position. And then you get the screamer grip, which is that double underhook grip on the two arms, and then you sit through to trap those arms and to try to lower his shoulders to get the pin or the near fall at least. And fourth, another example of a pin grip that you can get from crab ride. If you are applying wrist bar in half, and as you elevate him off to the side to try to get that wrist bar in half action started well, if he starts to grab your upper arm and is beginning to slip your half Nelson, what you can do is use your other foot to elevate him all the way across to the opposite side, again trying to boost him high into a stack position. So again, you can apply a screamer.